Financial decisions paralyze some people. But if you know how to think about finances, financial decisions can be made simple.
I think financial decisions have become more complex over time. The options and information surrounding financial decisions can cause analysis paralysis or the ostrich effect, and neither one of those things are helpful to making good financial decisions.
Throughout this year, you will be making financial decisions. If you make good financial decisions, you'll get ahead. On this podcast, we are going to give you the knowledge you can use to make good financial decisions.
One of the most common things that I see that's confusing to people is the understanding of what the time value of money means.
Time value of money, there's different variables that go into that. Five main ones. You have the time for a loan or for a savings program, you have the interest rate, you have the present value, which is the amount that you're starting with, you have the payment amount, which is a periodic cash flow, and you have future value, what you end up with, or what is done when you pay off a loan. So all of those five factors are usually present in some way, shape, or form in the time value of money equation.
It's really interesting how people confuse this and get them all combobulated. But the sad thing is that most people in America cannot pass a basic financial literacy test. And this has been proven time and time over again. But that's what we try to do, is help just make these things simple. Because if things are simple, it makes it easier. Because Einstein did say just because it's simple doesn't make it easier. But if it is simple and we explain how to make it easier, then people can actually use these things to get ahead financially and make their decisions much easier.
Oh, that is so true, that just because something is simple doesn't make it easy, but there are things you can do to make it easier.
So one of the things that we see a lot is people confusing what an average rate of return really means. First of all, they don't understand what average means, which is obvious because of the way they come up with some really grandiose ideas of what it's going to do for them. So can you explain that a little bit, Michele?
Well, I think about even in our family, if we discuss the average height of the people in our family. John, you're the tallest at 6'7", but we also have someone at 5'6". So if we come up with the average and say, oh, everyone is, this is the average height of everyone. When someone comes to our house, they're going to actually be surprised at the different heights that we have, because not everybody, in fact, probably nobody is the exact average. And that happens at the grocery store. You can say the average price of my groceries was this. Well, the meat is a lot more expensive than the pasta. And so, those prices, to say, oh, this is the average price per item, really tells you nothing about the cost of each item.
Yeah, you can actually lose money on a positive average return.
That's a really oxymoron for a lot of people.
So if you don't understand it, though, that's a problem.
Oh, sure. And then there's the other terms, annual rate of return. How do you know what's the difference between that or an internal rate of return? These are some financial concepts. You don't have to understand all the workings of these things, how they're figured, but you do kind of want to understand what they mean when you see them.
And sometimes I know people call me and they are asking me these questions about, well, what's this average, blah, blah, blah. And they, if you give them the answer, it's obvious they didn't understand it, especially by the next question. And so we have to just stop and break it down, because if we don't understand what the problems are, then we can't provide solutions.
We've all seen those signs on the side of banks or car lots that say 0% financing for so many months. That's another one that really confuses and perplexes people because they don't understand the details behind it.
And maybe they're not even confused by it. Maybe they think it really is a 0% financing. No interest? That sounds great. But it isn't always.
Not always. We have to know enough to figure out whether we're being told the truth when we see those flashy signs.
So since we're talking about annual percentage rates, it's interesting to look at how a loan actually works. If you take a loan for 5 years, $30,000 at 5%, maybe it's a car loan. And most people would think that they're paying 5% interest on that. But if you look at that whole 5-year time window, That's actually 13.2% volume of
Mhm.
interest. That could be confusing to people. How do you jump from 5% to 13.2?
Mm.
Yes.
Well, the same thing happens with a house too.
It
You get
does.
a certain percentage rate, and is that what you actually pay over 30 years? No, a much higher percentage rate.
And the longer the term of the loan, the higher that percentage is going to be. On a house loan, somewhere in the neighborhood of 5%, you're probably going to be looking very close. If you're doing a full 30-year mortgage, you're probably going to be looking close to a 50% volume of interest over that time.
But that's not necessarily a bad thing either because you do
No.
have to live somewhere. But what we need to do financially is even though we're paying that, then we have to find other areas where we can be smart with our money and apply these same financial principles in our favor.
Yeah.
Now, here's another one, compounding rate. What period are they using for that compounding rate? Is it monthly? Is it daily? Is it hourly? Is it annually? And you get into credit cards and you get into some of these, paycheck schemes and whatnot like that. Uh, And those periods and that compounding rate make a huge difference.
They can add up over time, and it doesn't look significant when you look at the numbers on a granular detail, but when you look at it in the overall scheme of things, it does increase the interest overall.
We're starting to talk about credit cards. So credit cards is another area where people get very confused because they don't understand. They know credit cards can be a good financial tool.
Yeah, you get the points, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, but if you don't pay off the balance and you can't just say, well, yeah, but I'm getting all the points. So I recently talked to some people. They have a lot of debt. They're wanting to get out of debt, but they have a credit card that is more than 10% of their debt,
Okay.
bad debt. And they were saying, yeah, but we get the points. So
So
they're
they're
paying,
so they're trying to say, well, maybe this is good debt because
yeah,
we're getting the points.
yeah,
Okay.
like the interest rate is 29.89 or 29.9. I don't know. It's up there.
Yeah.
But they're saying, yeah, but we get these points. So maybe that's not quite so bad.
And the points are like maybe 1 to 4%.
I don't know
Somewhere in
what
that
they
range.
were.
Yeah.
So I said, well, ideally, it would be nice if you didn't carry a balance on that, but could get the points.
There you
Pay it off every month, and that seemed like pie in the sky to them at this point. But still, the thinking that they are getting ahead using those credit cards is not really working.
Or look at another variation of that. I'm thinking of the guy that called in. It's been a few years now, but the guy that called in from Hawaii who was investing in real estate, but he had
Yes.
credit card debt. So he was using his credit cards to finance his real estate and thinking he was doing a great thing by getting this asset.
Yeah, and he was having some cash flow come in.
Yeah.
And so, but I started looking at the numbers. I said, but do you realize that your credit card debt is creating this negative cash flow for you? He's getting cash flow come in, but not even enough to pay pay the minimum payment on the credit card.
Ouch.
So this
Yeah.
really just comes down to some very simple mathematics is you've got to be able to track what you're doing
Mhm.
to find out if, what the gurus say to follow and invest, even if you have to use your credit card, if it's really going to pay off at the end. And that can be confusing to some people. It can be very, very paralyzing whether they jump into this or whether they wait. And if they just understand the basics that we're going to talk about after the break, they make a whole lot of difference. We see this all the time in life insurance. People get all excited about indexed universal life insurance because
Oh,
they get
yeah.
to take advantage of investing in the market without any risk. And that's about as true as buying oceanfront property in Arizona.
Yeah, investing always comes with with a type of risk. It might just not be in the form that you expect, and that's another confusion that many people have. Whether it's in the life insurance that's claiming to give you a little component of the investment section, or whether it's in something else, people tend to confuse the concept of saving and investing, and it's important to have a distinction between those in your mind and in your practical application.
Well, we're going to reduce all these issues to their basic elements. We're going to do that right after the break, so don't go away. We'll be right back.
Did you ever play with a set of these rings growing up? They make a great visual picture of how you should set up your finances. On top, you have the higher risk investments, the lower risk investments. This ring is debt, this ring is savings, and this ring is protection. This stand represents the economy. If there's one thing we know about the economy, is that it will change, and it does, and this can change. It's unstable. What some people do when they set up their finances, they take and they go for the shiny, high risk, potentially high yield investment. Now, potential return does not mean probable, and it is definitely not probable. So this doesn't perform as well as they hope, and they think they should add a more conservative investment that actually might return something. So they add that, and believe it or not, some people will go into debt for that. Add that to the debt they already have, and there's their debt ring right on top of that. If you are listening to this podcast, I hope that you have time to click the link in the description for the YouTube video, and we'll tell you where in that video you can see this demonstration, because it really comes alive when you see it. Well, you have these three negatives, these investments that aren't returning as well as you had hoped, and your debt, which is just a draw on your finances. And people think, oh, I should probably save something. So they add savings to that. Then they look at what they have going there. It looks a little precarious. So they plop some protection right on top of that. Well, if there's one thing we know about the economy, is that it will change. It is uncertain and unstable. And as soon as it changes, you lose your protection and your savings, which are the two things you want to keep most. That's the importance of doing it right. Start with protection. That makes a nice foundation for everything else you do financially. Once you have protection in, then add your savings program so you can keep more of the money you make. Next, make sure your debt is handled. Pay off the bad debts, keep the good debts. A good debt is one that gives you a tax advantage or limits your opportunity costs and allows you to make money. Once that's handled, you can do an investment. Hopefully this is something you know about, because those type of investments that you know something about tend to return better. And if you have extra cash flow and want to go for one of those potential high risk, high reward investments, then you can do that too. Now, when the economy changes, you're much more secure. At McPhee Insurance, we specialize in helping people set up this layer, the protection layer, the foundation for what they do financially. We specialize in designing and selling whole life insurance that becomes this protection layer for you. It's a good foundation for everything else you do financially. If you need life insurance, or if you need to get a life insurance policy you already own reviewed, we can help you with both of those things. Contact us by phone at 702-660-7000, or you can email us, team@mcpheeinsurance.com.
By the way, this is episode 450 of Wealth Talks podcasts. Over 8 years of shows. Would you do us a favor? There's a link in the resources. You can click and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We would greatly appreciate it, and it helps other people to find the show. Average rate of return is a great example of a confusing metric, because large fluctuations in the average rate of return can drastically change the overall results.
Well, John, you even talk about, you have an illustration you use to demonstrate how getting a positive average rate of return while still losing money. So
We
could you
do.
give that
Yeah.
example?
If you start with $1,000 and you lose 50% the first year, your investment of $1,000 is now down to $500. The next year, year 2, you can earn a 100% rate of return on your $500. Now it's back up to $1,000.
But that's
You're back
2
to where you
years.
started.
Yeah,
You
so-
lost 2 years. But that's an average rate of return. You take the minus 50 plus the 100%, add them together, divide by 2. That's an average rate of return of 25%.
And you divide by 2 because it was 2 periods.
2 years.
2 years.
Yeah. That's a great example of how the average doesn't really mean anything.
So they
It
could
could be misleading.
so they could be boasting, "Hey, getting 25% rate of return," but that doesn't mean that
Doesn't
you're
mean that you're ahead.
yeah.
Yeah,
And someone could actually lose money on getting a positive rate of return.
they can. And so this is where something like an annual rate of return that you are actually getting every year that's positive, or an internal rate of return can be used to differentiate from the average.
Well, we're talking about investing here, and oftentimes people feel intimidated when someone says, well, I can guarantee you a 25% rate of return. I've done that for 50 years, and I'm really good at this. And oh, let's go follow E.F. Hutton or whoever it is, you know?
Sure.
But the key is that they feel intimidated because they don't understand the metric.
Mm-hmm.
They don't understand how to break it down. Another area that really can make people confused is when they're in a sales situation. For example, buying a car, or like we just recently did, buying a tractor. Okay. If you can sit down real quick and just block out all the sales pitch and add up the payments that you're going to make, and if it doesn't equal the sticker price, there's some interest hidden in there, even if they say 0% financing.
And sometimes you even have to dig a little bit deeper than that, because what if they're adding to the overall sticker price? Maybe
Yes.
there's a different cash price. So that's another thing to look at. But yes, adding up those payments, once you have the real sticker price for cash, and once you have the real payment amounts, you can figure out, is it really 0% or not? And if it's more than 0%, then you can decide if you want to run that calculation yourself or get somebody else in your orbit that can do that.
So a few years ago, we did buy a car that was 0% interest.
Yes.
And when you did the calculations, it was actually 1 point something.
Still a good rate, though.
Yes, it was. And it was a good purchase to purchase that car. So just because it says 0%, if you find out, oh, this really isn't 0%, it doesn't mean that it's not a good financial decision for you.
That's true. And what about the tractor? You said that was at 0%?
Yes, years ago we bought a Kubota tractor and it really was 0%. There was no extra fees in charge and we figured it all out. So when we moved here and got more property, we needed another tractor. So I thought, well, we'll go back to Kubota, see if they have their 0% financing. And they do. But now there's a little trick to it.
Okay.
You have to insure the tractor for the entire time that the loan is outstanding.
Okay, so
And what
that
they
makes
do,
sense. They want to protect their investment.
absolutely. But when they throw that into the equation, now the interest rate on the tractor payment goes up to about 6.5%, 7%.
Okay.
Oh, wow. So that added quite that's a little bit of devil in the details that really changed the percentage rate.
It
So
does.
maybe still a good idea if you're planning to insure the tractor anyway.
It is. The insurance was very inexpensive for
Okay.
to look at it and paying it. So we just paid it up front. Now we've got a true 0% financing tractor
Okay.
payment.
Okay, so there's more than one way to skin a cat to accomplish your goals, right?
That's right. And if someone's going to lend you their money and make no interest on it for a long period of time, that's always a good deal.
Mm-hmm.
So now we come to credit cards. And I think this is a natural time to switch to credit cards because a lot of times we see credit cards that if they switch their balance, it's 0% for a certain period of time. And some, I don't know a lot about these. I know you've looked more into it, John. Sometimes there is a cost.
Almost always.
Almost
Yes.
always there is a cost, and that really needs to be evaluated to see if that cost can be overcome
Mhm.
through that transaction or if it is going to cause more problems.
The almost always part is on like balance transfers, I'm thinking. So
Mhm.
when people have an existing credit card balance and they're going to transfer that debt to another card that's offering the 0%, there's going to be a fee on that. It's usually
Okay.
somewhere in the neighborhood, of up 2 to 5% in there. It's going to be a flat fee on that. But you think about those 0% financing offers, they're usually over a 12-month, maybe an 18-month period. So they're going to be limited as well. So that is an interest rate
Mhm.
that applies then for that whole year.
And that's not a bad thing. You just
It
have
i-
to know it's there and don't think you're getting something nothing for nothing.
It is usually lower than the overall credit card interest rate if you just kept the balance on the same card. So that will be a strategy that some people use if they're working to pay down their debt.
Mhm.
Maybe do a few balance transfers to keep those 0% going. Yeah, it's going to be 3 to 5%, but it's still lower than the 29%
Mhm.
that the credit card would be accumulating, or whatever that rate is. Usually a higher rate on those credit cards.
So
That could be a short-term strategy. It's still not going to, get you that 0% financing. It's just kicking the can down the road, giving you a little bit more time.
the best way to use credit cards is just to pay them off at the when the payment comes due, not to just pay the minimum payment, but to pay it off.
And then
And
you actually do get to keep those points.
yes.
And that goes back to using someone else's money for a certain period of time with 0% interest.
Which is kind of like that time value of money that you were talking about at the beginning, one of
Yes.
the
Mhm.
financial challenges that people face. So, understanding that time value of money, being able to use a credit card with the intent of paying it off when it comes due, then you get the points, you're not paying out the extra interest, and now you have a financial tool handy in your pocket that you can use but it is not harming you.
Hmm.
But it takes discipline.
It does.
And, I'm amazed at how many people we talk to that say, oh, I can't trust myself.
Mm.
And so maybe those people are the people that need to listen to the gurus that say, cut your credit cards up, because they don't have the discipline. But with good discipline, all you have to do is follow what you know is right. Now, there might be a time where you miss a payment because you didn't get logged into the computer to make the payment at time. Or it might be that you had to spend on a credit card for an emergency. But even then, those cards can be very, very powerful financial tools because it gives you an opportunity to change cash flow and to manage cash flow. And managing cash flow is the key of business and personal finance.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about the difference between saving and investing?
Most
We wanna
people
make that-
confuse
Yeah.
investing as their savings account. So they'll boast about putting, another 5% into their 401k above and beyond what their employer's matching, and think that they're putting that money away for themselves in the future when they're actually taking a risk. And they don't understand what their loss tolerance is. They are choosing to live at a lower lifestyle today and have less opportunities now for the hope of a possibility in the future. That's always called an investment.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm thinking too, I can't remember the details on this, Tom, but you were talking about, I think it was in the 70s, before 401ks became in vogue and before they were trying to entice people to save in 401ks, when really 401ks are an investment. The savings rate was like I'm thinking, was it 14%?
It was 14.7%
Okay.
before the ERISA bill went through and allowed 401ks and whatnot. And the purpose, of course, Congress said, like everything else act they pass, is supposed to help saving. It actually hindered saving because now they believe that their employer's match is going to make up the difference. And they didn't take the responsibility. No, this is my job to make sure that when I retire, I have enough money to live on.
And so the amount of money people were saving actually decreased because they thought, now it's happening. This savings automatically happening. I don't need to do anything myself. And then that was also investing because back in 2008, when the market crashed, we joked around, people's 401ks became 201ks. And, we laugh about that, but it was no laughing matter for the people who saw that go down. And especially if they were getting ready to retire, that's just not something you overcome. That's an investment.
Even over this last year, we've seen people's 401ks and IRAs drop by 20%. And that happens because of the people misunderstanding the difference between saving and keeping money.
So would it be accurate to summarize that an investment is anywhere that you do have some risk of losing the principal, whereas savings is like the cash cushion that we were talking about a few podcasts ago? A cash cushion that can be used for emergency purposes, but can also be used for opportunity purposes.
Mm-hmm.
And people that are always going to the investments and putting their money in a situation with risk don't get to the benefits of that cash cushion.
Absolutely. An investment, too, often involves a manager, and a manager is going to take a fee because they have to be paid for the service they're providing, whether it's good or bad. Whether advice turns out good or whether it makes you lose money, it doesn't matter. They got to be paid.
Whether the account goes up or whether it goes down. Yeah.
And of course, one of the things that we see very, very frequently is people confusing and getting all combobulated about life insurance. They just don't understand the terminology, or they approach life insurance like they would an investment with big dollar signs in their eyes and believing that this is going to be a huge payoff for them. And I think that life insurance agents and insurance companies that propagate the fact that you can invest in life insurance are doing a huge disservice to the public.
And when you look at life insurance terminology, there are some complex terms you have to study to understand, what does this really mean? What does it actually do? And I think a lot of people that are looking to buy life insurance, regardless of the type it is, they have good intentions behind it. But just because they have those good intentions doesn't mean it necessarily turns out great.
Oh, good intentions. That makes me think of financial decisions that we've made where we had good intentions, but it really didn't turn out that great.
Yeah, I remember when, John, you were just a little guy and we bought a camper.
Yep, that's the one.
It was a good deal, I thought, and I thought this will be great for family time. We can get away.
It
And
was a used camper,
yeah, it
Okay.
was used, and
but you're a handyman and you thought, hey, I can fix this up so it'll look nice and put it on the back of your truck. We'll have some great enjoyment, some family times. Only there were some things wrong with the camper that you didn't realize at first.
yeah, we got into it and we realized, oh, the frame needed to replace on the front because it had rotted. And so that required the peeling back of all the sheet metal and replacing the framework. And then after that was all done, it really needed to be repainted because the damage that got done in peeling that sheet metal back. Then we thought, well, we might as well upgrade the upholstery in here too because it's, kind of dated from the 60s and on and on and on. And then we took it out on our first trip and it just wasn't all cracked up to be what we thought it was going to be.
That's right. And as painful as it was, because we took money from our savings to fix that up, thinking,
Yeah.
this is going to be really nice. And we realized this is not a good decision financially or otherwise. And so we decided, okay, it's time to cut our losses.
Time to sell.
Time to sell.
Yeah. Okay.
Only that
Sounds great.
it sounded really great. Only the market just wasn't there for it.
One of the key factors about this camper was it had an easy load on it. And I thought, that's just going to be great for me. I'm the only guy that's strong enough to really do this. I don't have to run around the camper and do all 4 jacks and everything. And the first time I used the easy load to take the camper off that first trip, it broke.
Oh no.
And so now we were stuck into even more money getting this thing fixed up. And that reminds me of people that buy life insurance. They're going to buy this easy IUL policy that's going to make all their payments for them after the 15th year because the market is going to do so tremendously. It's just going to work great for them. And then they find out, oh, that average rate of return was over 5 years instead of monthly.
Mhm.
That internal rate of return wasn't what I thought it was going to be over here on this projected side, and the guarantees are 0.
Mhm.
And now they have to sink a whole lot of more money into this policy just to keep it. Well, at that point, you've got to figure you're going to pour more good money after bad. And that's what we did with the camper.
Mhm.
We ended up selling it, and it went to the dogs.
Quite literally. It took a while to sell, and when it did sell, the people were so excited to get it for their dogs.
Wow.
And so
All the work that you put in, all the extra time. Yeah, you recoup some of the money that you put into it, but it went to the dogs. Interesting.
yeah. And you know what? We really don't talk about that story a lot. That was a financial decision that we made, and we don't always make right financial decisions, but then we make it right as soon as we can. And
Well-
so that became in our repertoire of things that we learned from
Mhm.
and can be more cautious and careful about as we go forward.
Well, we just did a review for someone down in Austin, Texas that bought an IUL because all the shiny figures on those projected values just look great. But he got concerned and he called us and he said, can you do a review for us? And we did. And we showed him the clause in there that the insurance company, at their discretion at any time, for any reason, can change the internal rate. They could just never lower it to low the guarantee. Well, the guarantee is 0 in that policy.
Mm.
And he was noticing that his monthly returns in that policy that was projected were just way, way off on the low side.
Mm.
And when he read that clause, we read that clause together, he goes, okay, I know what I need to do.
Mm.
I'm going to let this policy go to the dogs and I'm going to start something different.
So sometimes you got to cut those losses. Yeah.
Mhm.
The nice thing about it is that life insurance can be a very good financial tool when it does have the guarantees. When
Absolutely.
it doesn't have those clauses in it, you have to get the right type. That's why we specialize in helping people with whole life insurance and the term insurance that they need to cover their costs. Then you're not trying to mix the investment world like happens in IUL, and that's where you lose your guarantees.
Yeah, if you have a good, solid foundation with whole life, everything else you do financially is going to be much better.
So how do you get good life insurance?
How do you know if you've got a good policy or a bad policy before you buy it?
How do you know if a policy you already have is good or bad?
We're going to answer all these questions and more next week on Wealth Talk.